You're finally here. You finally arrived. You've at last found the one place which holds the answers to the questions of the ages. You're excited. Your heart palpitates. Is it real? Can it be true? You're understandably hesitant, yet determinedly hopeful. That is good. Your faith in such matters will be rewarded. You'll not find pat and cliched answers here. No! Here is a place of clarity, of definition, of explanation, of truth. Here combines science and religion, removes tradition and replaces it with fact. Here the universe is holographic, yet tangible, ethereal, yet substantive. Here is a place where time is understood as atemporal. Here there is harmony amidst chaos. Here is where the darkened glass is finally cleared. Here is where you'll find the answers to all the unanswered questions which stretch across the cosmos.
And you are across the cosmos for the next hour. I am Chase Rockwell, and I am your host. I'm joined in studio once again by my co-hosts,
Lou Rodgers,
Wally Rodgers,
and David Cameron.
Last time we were discussing the situation with respect to homosexuals and their relationship with the Christian church. Primarily the Christian church, because there are some faiths whereupon homosexuality is absolutely not a problem, and there's other faiths where they will kill you to death. Specifically, the religion of peace, which is Islam. It is a religion of peace because they broke no dissent. So if you are standing out from the crowd in Islam, you will be killed. Simple as that. For example, in the country of Iran, a hyper Islamic state, homosexuality is punishable by death. And executions there are a spectator sport, whereupon the victim is placed with a noose around its neck and then drug up into the air, usually on a crane or derrick of some sort, where they just dangle until they're dead. This is a country that I will hasten to add is negotiating presently with our president, Barack Hussein Obama, over nuclear capability. Keep that in mind when you, as part of the homosexual community, decide to take the Christian community to task. That the man that statistically, overwhelmingly, most of you voted for is supporting a regime that kills you to death. So, I wanted to get that out of the way. We'll return to our discussion. We had a Jeopardy question, and the Jeopardy question essentially was this: if Levitical law prohibits under penalty and pain of death incest, where did we all come from if we are descended from Adam and Eve solely? That's the question. That's the gazillion-dollar question, because it shouldn't be. There is no place in Scripture where you can find that the incest prohibition was rescinded. There's presumptions. There's assumptions. When you build upon a flawed premise, you're going to wind up with a flawed conclusion. The flawed premise in this case is that we all descended from two people. The conclusion, of course, is that then we have to do gymnastics, scriptural gymnastics, in order to make everything fit, rather than adopt something along the line of Occam's razor. Usually the most obvious answer is, in fact, the correct one. And in this case, the most obvious answer is that there were more than two people other than Adam and Eve. And a close reading of the scriptures, specifically the difference between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, will point that out. People will vehemently disagree. That's for another show. We will cover it somewhat in this particular episode. So let us continue. If incest was punishable by death, as per Levitical law, the violator suffering under the penalty and pain of death, why are we here? Let's find out as we return to this fascinating discussion.
Let's just start with the whole premise of Adam and Eve being the actual creation of all mankind.
Mm-hmm. Right. You have to. If you are of Orthodox thought, you have to.
Right. So somewhere along the lines, we have brother and sister kissing each other and liking it.
Well, they obviously didn't like it. If they liked it, then they would be going to hell.
Then they'd be going to hell.
This was just simply a functionary duty because
we must procreate.
There's a flaw in the plan. Flaw in the plan? Is that possible?
You mean an imperfect plan from a perfect
Everything
God?
was good. So okay. Anyway, one would have to then say that okay, incest was fine back then because the genetic pool was purer.
Right. Yeah. And orthodoxy. I remember running across this particular statement and question early in my day and asking a particular preacher, where did all the different ethnicities come from then? And his response was, well, Adam never knew what color was going to come out of Eve.
And surprisingly, there are a number of women who use that today.
That's racist!
Yeah, and
I'm as shocked as you are.
yeah. I was like, yeah, he just drew pictures. I just see Adam pacing around outside the little, mud tent going, I wonder what color it's going to be this week.
Will I be a son of a bitch?
And here's the thing. I heard all this stuff too, and
What stuff did you hear?
well, what you're talking about specifically.
I mean, we need to slam it home for the audience who may not be used to all of this ancient Christian mismatch.
Well,
essentially,
the question of the races and the people in
just
different
the people in
locations,
general. Screw the races right now. Just the people in general. Where'd they come from?
Well, and what
Thou shalt not commit incest. That's a pretty quick, experiment.
And
Well,
this is
that's it.
where I was
Nothing more I can do.
where I'm going with this is questions like that have been covered up for years by, hey, you got to have faith. You got to believe God can do anything.
You got to have the faith.
You got to have
Let me
faith.
tell you something.
You just got to believe, and God can do anything.
I'm all for faith and believing in God.
Oh, I agree with you.
But if you Christians out there that hold on to this orthodoxy mentality and you cling to it for dear life and you rail at us because we look at you and laugh, because we've read a little bit more. Have you read the Old Testament and seen how many times brothers and sisters, fathers and daughters have sex, and yet it says if you have incest in your family, you're dead, you're going to hell?
Well, that was
Noah.
See, that's the thing.
Noah.
You have to ask these questions. You just have to. If you don't ask these questions, you'll believe anything.
Exactly.
Even if you don't ask, sometimes look, the mob mentality leads us to not ask questions.
That's my point.
And
That's what I'm saying. Don't ask the question because you're. But see, here's the problem with that. The person that can't ask the question that's rolling around in their mind, they're insecure. Okay. They're wanting security from the mob, from the group.
All right, I'm gonna do something. I just want to read a little quick thing to kind of hammer this point home for those who don't really understand what we're talking about. Essentially, the Christian perspective is that everybody descended from Adam and Eve. That should be axiomatic from most anyone, but I don't know who all is listening to this, so I'm going to just spell it out. We all came from Adam and Eve according to Orthodox belief. Now, there is a Levitical law. This is Leviticus 18, verse 6. Chapter 18, verse 6. But I'm going to read a couple of verses before and a verse afterwards. So starting in verse 5, this is what Leviticus says. So you shall keep my statutes and my judgments, by which a man may live if he does them. I am the Lord. None of you shall approach any blood relative of his to uncover nakedness. I am the Lord. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, that is, the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother. You are not to uncover her nakedness. Okay, and it goes on, sister, etc. This is against incest. You're not to be screwing around with your family members. So, what changed for the unchanging God to allow incest in the beginning and then not to allow incest later on? If it was good in the beginning, why couldn't it have remained good throughout? So, I have asked this question, and I've gotten a variety of different answers, which essentially all tend to melt down to, after enough people were on Earth, incest was no longer not needed. And that was confusing to me because since they were all essentially relatives, I didn't get it.
Well,
is it any less if it's my cousin?
Well,
my second cousin? What difference does it make?
Again, if we all came from Adam and Eve, then my wife is still my sister.
Well, exactly. And so there was this labyrinth of excuses, and they theorized or conjectured a response, but they couldn't point me to a specific scripture that said, and on this day, thus saith the Lord, the ban was rescinded, and you can't, or the ban is implemented. You can't have sex with your family members anymore. It's not there. You can't find it because it doesn't exist. This was a law handed down to Moses on Sinai from an angel or spiritual entity, if you will, a celestial. What is referred to in the book of Job, chapter 37, verse 8, as the Kokvi Boker, or the morning stars. That is incidentally also the same name that, it's Job chapter 38, verse 7. The Kokvi Bokar are the morning stars, and it's the same name that is given to Lucifer in Isaiah chapter 14. It's important that we understand where our laws are coming from, and that the Old Testament was not coming from Father God Almighty, but rather from ambassadors who were to be his face to us during that period of time. When Christ died on the cross and rose again, the covenant that kept us under their bondage, these powers, these authorities, these Kokvi Bokers of the Old Testament, was nullified. And so was the covenant that they had written to us. So we are no longer under that covenant. We are under a new covenant. And this new covenant is through Christ. And it is to us. And that's important because it means that we are no longer the same type of people held to these limitations under the old covenant. Now we are truly free. But with freedom comes a consequence, a price.
Responsibility.
Paul said in Corinthians that all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. And what he means by that is this: the law no longer binds us as it did in the past. But because we are being called to a higher purpose now, if you will, and that is to be the face of Christ to one another, there's a lot of responsibility. So we can continue to in jackassian behavior, regardless what it is. But the responsibility for not engaging in jackassian behavior has gotten much higher because now we have an effect. There is no fabricated law that's going to protect us and excuse our behavior. So, whereas
there's no loophole.
Well, I don't even know that I can call it a loophole so much as just I did it because God said so. Yeah. It's not acceptable anymore.
No, it's not.
But it's often used by people, especially in the clergy, who can't explain some of this behavior between the Old Testament God and Christ. And so they'll just give you this, well, because God said so. Well,
that's not good enough.
It doesn't even begin to get good enough. We've got a large number of people who are, for whatever reason, drawn to a particular sex and it is their own. Yeah. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't even necessarily agree with all the psychiatrists have concluded on the subject as to why this happens. A lot of it is you've got a spiritual entity inhabiting a biological construct. And the biological construct kind of does what the biological construct's going to do. And the spirit is supposed to be driving the biological construct rather than the other way around. I know that the law, the Mosaic law, gives way too much power to the biological construct, because
It's
that's
all
all the Kokavi Boker, or the morning stars, understood. This was their creation. It was their model. They understood that. The spirit that imbues our bodies comes from God, Father God Almighty. Different situation altogether. And that's why Christ focused on the heart and not the body.
Well, because the law never produced love. It didn't produce righteousness. Where in our relationship today, knowing that He has set us free from the condemnation, sin and shame, not that there's not right and wrong, but now what gets produced in us is, through this relationship, we learn to become like our Father, to become like Jesus. We learn to take on, and not through the law, because again, I'm going to say it again, the law, in my opinion, does not produce unconditional love.
No, it doesn't. And it wasn't meant to. Paul called it a schoolmaster.
Where in our relationship with Christ, we are learning to become like our Father. We're learning to be His child, in a sense. I mean, we are His child, but then we're also growing into it. Because we, in essence, in my mind, we are very immature children.
We stay that way if we remain under the confines of the law.
Absolutely.
Christ told us to take upon His yoke, which was light and was easy. And that's opposed to the burden
of the law.
But how many pastors have you heard teach that?
Yeah, because they don't know the difference. They still believe that the law is what will change you. They still believe that the fear of you dying and going to hell is what motivates you. I know I met a man, it's been 25 years ago, and I'm not going to say who he is. He's a Christian person in my life, and I had a little spat with another family member, and this person...
You didn't punch him out, did you?
No, we just had an argument. And it was over this idea of the law and stuff. All of us were Christians, and this man told me, he said, Dave, nobody changes except for through fear. Fear is what motivates everybody. And I'm like, well, that's not the way I see it. Because I had a temper. I had people in fear. I was in fear by groups of gangs.
Sure.
I was in fear. It didn't produce anything good in my heart.
I have railed against the prosperity doctrine more than once. And there is one thing in my dealings that I came out with a very good understanding of from them, and it ties into what you just said, David. That's the fact that the way that was put was simply this. Faith is believing in God's ability to create, maintain, and love, and do all things. Fear is the ability of believing Satan's ability to destroy anything God does. So to say we're motivated by fear, to me, is asinine.
Well, because they don't understand where fear comes from. They
don't.
They attribute it to loving God.
They go to this terrible Old Testament statement of fear God. But
it's a sign of respect to God to fear.
Yeah, but what would Paul say about it? No, come boldly to the throne of grace.
And what child in a loving relationship has to approach their father cowering with their head over their hands because they think their father is going to pull out a .45 and just cap him?
We call it abuse today.
Well, and with this in mind, let's go back to our topic. So why should those that are gay or homosexual, why should they not be able to have the same relationship?
Exactly.
Why should they, wherever they're at? Because, see, the reason is it's the bias of people, the insecurity of people, and the law. They're using the law against these folks that have something's different with them. And I'm not that way, but I want them to, how are they ever, let's say they are wrong. Let's say I'm wrong. How am I going to overcome if now overcoming is through relationship? If we say, sorry, get out of the church, you're practicing homosexual, you must die.
Does the church say that with you're practicing drunkard? You're practicing glutton?
Well, it depends on how legalistic they are, because what I've seen is they'll welcome them in, but if they don't change quick enough, they're gone.
Yeah, you know about that, don't you?
They're gone. They're gone.
Yeah, you welcome in. You've got 60 days to become saved.
I gave you a year to straighten up, and you didn't do it. Get the hell out!
Well, and then the question comes in, with their concept of salvation, the question comes in, they accept you as saved, but yet you confess that you're struggling with something, and if you don't get it squared up in time, then they say, well, you must not have been saved.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
because God only did half a work.
So they don't.
No, they lay it all off on the individual.
Yes, they do.
Well, you lacked faith.
Right.
You
That's
lacked
right.
faith.
Yeah, it's the same crap.
So
as
through the law, their faith causes them to get saved. Is what it really, whether they realize it or not, their faith is of works.
There is no faith there. That's the whole point. There is no faith in that
faith
situation.
as in their religion.
Yes.
Again, I highlight the fact that it is a hard issue. So, if you are this, I'll just take, for example, a pastor who is very legalistic, let's say, and he's just very much against the whole homosexual lifestyle. Yet, he'll admit that, gosh, if God would allow it, he'd have multiple wives. Where is his heart? And why is that any different from the homosexual? I don't see it.
No, there's no difference. Because
so the only thing stopping you from not having multiple wives is not that you love your wife and don't want to disrespect her. It's that there's this nagging little thing in the Old Testament about you not having multiple wives. Well, you know what? There's an argument to be made that you really actually could, because God knows all of the Old Testament patriarchs did.
Yeah,
it was a welcome
Old Testament.
So I would go with it. Seriously, I would go.
Well,
with
it. Yeah, I'm not that crazy. One is enough.
But I think there is an argument to be made for all you legalists out there.
Oh, I can make the argument.
God knows that you're there, even if you won't admit it. That says you can take on more than one wife.
I can make that
Paul
argument. I've studied it.
Paul said all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. And when you start taking on multiple wives, that's going to be driven home very clearly.
And if you're going to fight us on this, the only verse you're going to come out of the New Testament with is that he should be married to a man of one wife. Well, you're referring to a deacon that became married to the church and was too busy taking care of the church to have more than one wife. So that's the only argument against it, and it's easily defeated.
Well, and here's the thing: we have to be what I call honest with ourselves, or you call it. You said it.
That's a hard thing to do for a lot of people.
Shakespeare.
Be true to oneself.
Right.
And
Hamlet.
Here's the thing:
no, it was Othello.
We
God bless it.
We as Christians are, what I've seen so often, we're not true. We feel and believe something, but we aren't going to admit it because I'm going to be rejected.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, you talk to most of the Christians today in churches, and you talk about the Westboro Baptist Church, and they'll be like, oh, well, they're doing it wrong. And there'll be so much hate slandered on them. And the fact is that they don't think any different.
No, they just vocalize it.
Yeah, Westboro Baptist is just actually doing it.
It was Hamlet. You told me it was Othello.
I thought it was Othello. I was wrong.
I knew it.
Oh, boy. But you're right.
I failed you, my listeners. I'm sorry.
About that. I know I simplify things. It's the way I think. But I believe that hate comes from misunderstanding our relationship with God, keeping the law.
And stark naked fear.
Absolutely.
Well, that's just not wanting people to see me running around naked, but it's not a pretty picture.
Well, I know that. Not
You
based
do
on
know that.
Not based on
Well,
you.
then. Well, this was
on
a timely
me.
conversation.
No, I'm talking about myself. I see myself in my mirror in my bedroom, and I hate it.
All right.
Anyway.
One of the things I wanted to bring up with respect to the Old Testament law and the admonitions with respect to homosexuality, against homosexuality, was this little nugget of information. And that is, throughout history, when you look at other laws, and just for the listeners' edification, the Mosaic Law was actually the latecomer to the party.
Very much so.
Of all of the empires, societies, etc., in history, they were one of the last to actually codify some sort of a law for their people. The most, or the closest law that comes to the Mosaic Law in structure and form, and in delivery, interestingly enough, would have been the law of Hammurabi, and that would be King Hammurabi, and it was given to them just about 150 years before the Mosaic Law was given. And what's interesting about the law of Hammurabi is what it says as opposed to what it doesn't say, but how closely it mirrors the Mosaic Law. So much so that a lot of archaeologists have conjectured that perhaps Moses
Borrowed it.
had read it and simply borrowed it. Yes, because he grew up in Pharaoh's household, and he would have had access to a lot of that type of material that wasn't necessarily available to the run-of-the-mill Jew of that era. And so it's difficult when you look at the law of Hammurabi side by side by the Levitical law, if you will. How you can't see a lot of bleed over. There are certain parts that are almost verbatim exactly the same. So then you look at the delivery. Moses was received his law on Mount Sinai from his God, and Hammurabi received the law essentially the same way. There's an obelisk, and I don't think it's called an obelisk. It's called something else, but I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. With an etching that has the whole of the law, which is 213 some odd, maybe more than 213, 200 plus some different laws are written on this obelisk. And then at the very top, it's God's, the Hammurabic God giving the law to Hammurabi, which is really similar to how the Hebrew God gave his law to Moses. So there's those similarities there. What is not present are any specific admonitions against homosexuals. The Hammurabic Code is more interested in essential conduct, restraints, constraints amongst the people. It also contains the same admonition of an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, as is in the Levitical law. Interestingly enough, they found the same situation. There needed to be measures, there needed to be boundaries. People were getting robbed or killed or this or that, and the affected would go out and wipe out their entire family or go 10 times over. This interjected something of equality in retribution. That was part of the Hammurabic Code. Well, you go back into earlier societies, how did they deal with the whole notion of homosexuality? And it is really interesting. I just want to go through some of these quickly because they did deal with it, and they all handle it somewhat different. One of the ones that I found that was most interesting is you go into the Native American Indian culture, which is all but ignored in biblical texts because they didn't think anybody was over here. It was just a bunch of, I don't know.
They didn't
just
know
didn't exist. But Native American cultures, for the most part, were a mysterious group who had their own view of God, which was quite divergent from that of the ancient Hebrews. Native Americans believed something similar to the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, insofar as they believed that God created three types of people: male, female, and two spirits. And I get this little thing about two spirits from Wikipedia, so you'll bear with me for a moment. Two-spirited or two-spirit usually indicates a native person who feels their body simultaneously manifest both a masculine and a feminine spirit, or a different balance of masculine and feminine characteristics than usually seen in masculine men and feminine women. Two-spirit individuals are viewed in some tribes as having two identities occupying one body. Their dress is usually a mixture of traditionally male and traditionally female articles, or they may dress as a man one day and a woman in the other. According to Sabine Lang, many tribes have distinct gender and social roles. Some specific roles, sometimes held by male-bodied spirits, two spirits rather, include detail of dance to the bird she, painted, that's a painting, healers or medicine persons, conveyors of oral traditions and songs, fortune tellers of the future, conferrers of lucky names on children or adults, nursing during war expeditions, potters, matchmakers, makers of feather regalia for dances, special role players in the sun dance. These were all comprised of various tribes, and I'm not going to get into all of them. But
Well, yeah,
suffice to
every
say,
tribe had their
they
own
all
separate
had
views. And
a way that they regarded essentially two-spirit individuals.
they looked at it as quite natural.
They did.
They didn't take them out and kill them?
No.
No.
It was very natural
It
to them.
was just part of it. And we're going back to the Near East. The codes of... give me a second here. Eukakergenia, which... it was a code written about 273 BC. Old. Urnamu is another one from 2100 BC. And, of course, the Hammurabi. None of these... all were written way before the Mosaic Law. None of them had any specific mention on prohibitions on homosexuality.
No.
And we get into the Hebrew God, and we have the Ten Commandments and 613 Levitical laws. There's lots of other stuff that came up, bounced around here and there. As I said, the Hebrews were more or less trying to put their canon together up until the time of the Hasmonean dynasty, which was right around 150 or so at BC, right around the Maccabean War period. They did speak on homosexuality. There was a lot of differentiation when you compare the Jewish law and culture to that of others. There's a lot of stark differences insofar as the fact that the Jews' law kept them apart.
By design.
It by design is speculative. I believe it's by design.
I am convinced it's by
but
design.
Some others might not be. And I believe it's by design for a specific reason, and it gets back to these beings that you'll find in Job chapter 38, verse 7, the Kokvi Boker, and these morning stars, if you will. These are entities. I call them celestial beings. They're also referred to celestial beings in Jude and I think in Acts.
I think so.
I'd have to go back to my Bible. They are the gods of this world. They are the entities that Paul is speaking about at the end of Ephesians, in Ephesians chapter 6. The ones we are supposed to be putting on the full armor of God to protect ourselves from. They are the influence. Well, this one particular God who gave this law to Moses is the one that we're really having to deal with respecting this admonition on homosexuality. Is it good? Is it bad? Does it help? Does it hinder? Well, the question should be, will it impede one's ability to have a relationship with Jesus Christ and to be his face to others? And again, I can only speak personally for me. I have known lots of different people. Some are homosexual, some aren't. Some have been out-and-out jerks. Others have not. I can recall two people I knew who were homosexual, who I had, I guess a friendship you might want to call, although one really wasn't a friendship. One was just a straight-out jerk. He seemed to be a very conflicted young man and didn't like himself too much. He was acerbic, cutting, insulting, and he was also gay. And I never had any problem with him except the fact that he always seemed to be goading me into an argument. Then there was another person who liked to tease me because he knew that I was, not that way, and he used to try to elicit, reactions from me I guess he thought were amusing. But he and I ended up having something of a relationship that got into the philosophical. I would ask him questions, he'd give me answers, he'd ask me questions. We went back and forth on all sorts of things. And they were two totally different people, yet they were both gay. So there's not one size fits all sort of a situation. And again, while that should be axiomatic, that seems to be lost on many people of the Christian faith who don't think that way. I guess they think that they all hang out in a club or something, and they all act exactly the same way. People are people. For the love of God.
They see the gay pride parade in San Francisco down in the Crisco district.
And I've had to deal with that too.
Yeah, and that's what they assume all homosexuals are.
Okay, and that brings me to another point that I wanted to get here. We've been talking about how should Christians respond to homosexuals in the church. I can only speak again for me because I'm only one of the four of us here. And we're supposed to regard people as God would have us regard them.
Correctly.
Christ died for all, and we're to be a light to them. So if you're, pronouncing condemnation on him, killing him, wanting to see him killed because of that, you're not much of a light. You're a burned out bulb.
Maybe a death ray.
And maybe need to be replaced. So this brings me to the other side, and that is these opportunists. Now, I said there were homosexuals who could be jerks, and there are homosexuals who could be nice guys. That's the same for humans. There's people who are good, and there's people who are just rotten. Okay.
Look, I had a guy one time tell me, "You have to like me because I'm homosexual."
No, I don't.
And I looked at him and said, "I don't have to like you because you're gay. I could care less. I don't like you because you're an anus."
Now, there's a situation going on now with a lot with the leadership, I'm going to put it that way, within the LGBT community that is trying to make end runs or inroads, if you will. And while I think they believe they're helping their cause, if you will, I think that usurping someone else's traditions is not necessarily good for their cause.
I would agree.
The Christians have a marriage situation or a marriage ceremony, and a lot of that is taking place in a church. It is a solemn covenant between the two of them and their God. Now, you can rename marriage however you'd like. It's not going to change that. An official marriage in the United States, anyway, and I know in a lot of civilized industrial countries, if you will, also requires a license. And all this license does is basically take two people and wrap all of their legals up into one. It's a variation of a limited liability corporation. And you can do that now in every state in the union. You want to construct a union, a contractual agreement between you and somebody else, irrespective of their sex, you can do it. Is it a little bit more laborious? Sure. But it depends really upon what you regard as laborious. We've got certain laws now that recognize automatically the marriage between a man and a woman in most states, and all this paperwork is just generated automatically because there's laws that surround it. It doesn't mean you can't do it regardless, and many people have. It seems that what the homosexual community is up in arms about is that the church is not recognizing their unions. They already know that the legals are possible, but they want the church to be bent into accepting them in this regard. I got news for you. It's not going to work. It just isn't going to work. When you usurp their little spot of land, they'll simply get up, move, and go to another spot of land. And that's it. When you foist your opinions in that manner on someone else, you are no better than them foisting their opinions on you. And becoming part of the problem doesn't fix the problem. This jackassian behavior amongst some in the LGBT community who are going around suing little tiny businesses because they know before they walk through the door that this is a Christian-owned business, and they don't, because of the tenets of their faith, believe that they should be making cookies or cakes or what have you to celebrate something that goes against their religion. They're looking for a fight, and they're deliberately destroying other people. Deliberately destroying. Now, just because you got smacked doesn't mean it gives you license to go and smack somebody else. Jesus Christ wouldn't have done that. Why are you? That's my question to the LGBT community.
Well,
It's a good one.
It's a very good question, and I understand to some degree how they've got to where they're at because they're insecure. They weren't accepted. They want to be accepted.
I think right now they've got the ball and they're running with it, and they don't care who they run over.
Right.
But the problem is they're going to get clotheslined,
but they're
not too far off.
Well, yeah,
because nobody's going to put up with that for much longer.
Well, they're cutting off their nose to spite their
They
face.
most definitely are.
Because the reality of it is they want to be accepted in the Christian community, but they don't want to be like Jesus.
I'm not
They
accepted
don't
in
wanna
the Christian
they don't wanna
community.
be accepted by the Christian community. They want the Christian community remolded in their image. And my question is, why is that so damned important?
Well,
Make your own. What the hell do you think? Listen,
Let's
listen.
just
For all
simplify it.
my gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered friends out there, why do you think Across the Cosmos exists? Is it because that every one of us sitting behind this microphone right now can get up in the pulpits in front of our church and say whatever we want? Hell no. Each one of us has met the church head on and have been steamrolled by them. I have been called a heretic by these people so many times. As I said, I may as well just make it my legal name. Okay, you guys may think that you're being persecuted in a certain way by the church. Hey, let me tell you something. No more than I have been, buddies.
Yeah,
Well,
we're all
and-
in the same boat here.
And I think what you hit on earlier is what they should be focusing on is that their security. They need to find security in who they are and their own relationship with God. And
I think it's different than that. I see it as get even.
well,
There's a lot of that.
That's
That's what they're
even
doing.
what it is.
That's what they're doing. But I'm
especially
saying
the
what
case-
they should be doing
Well-
is finding their own security in who they are.
Well,
Okay.
it's not about their security. The case in point in Portland, the two lesbian women that wanted to get married go to a small bakery that's struggling. You know, it's later found out they actually hunted for that
Yes, they
specific.
did.
They researched until they found a Christian bakery that they knew for certain would say no.
Because Portland is awash with little bakeries,
Yes.
and little nooks and niche type
Right.
bakeries types.
This bakery said, no, we're not going to make a cake. It comes down to, should I be able to go to a black bakery and say, I want a sheet cake with KKK, white supremacy forever, and a burning cross on it, and have that guy not be offended and say, get the hell out of my store?
we should be able to.
Well, and in the same aspect,
and you will. They'll throw you out.
there was after that incident, there was a guy who posted this video online of him calling gay bakeries and asking, "Can I get a cake that says gay marriage is wrong, and for pro regular marriage?" And all of them told him basically to go screw himself. They all yelled at him and told him that they were doing nothing. He was doing nothing but putting them down.
Just as an aside, every time you bang on the table, an angel loses its wings.
Understood.
It's a tie. There's a hammer that goes up and whacks angels on the head.
Oh boy.
I get that. One of the other things is that when they were calling Muslim bakeries, same difference. Muslims were saying, Allahu Akbar! They're blowing themselves up, but they weren't getting fined by the state or the mayor. And the mayor in Portland, Oregon, presently is a lesbian. And that's because the last mayor they had was hounded out of office because he wasn't a lesbian or gay. He was just an out-and-out friggin' crook.
Yeah, he's just a thief.
He was just a thief, and his girlfriend was on
Excellent. Is that you?
on the dole. But he was a good Democrat, as is the new one. So these the Muslims are essentially given a pass, whereas the Christians are not.
Well, that's because the liberal community is afraid to tackle and attack the
they're
Muslims.
terrified. They're terrified. A Christian will faint back.
They're terrified for a different political reason.
This couple in this bakery that are being destroyed right now
Have been destroyed.
were Muslim. If it had gone to this point, there'd be a fatwa out on the lesbian couple,
Yes.
and probably the mayor and anyone else who upheld this ruling. They would have to be living in hiding right now.
Exactly.
But they know that a Christian bakery isn't going to do that. They're going to seek legal remedy and probably lose, because this is a mindset of, well, I've been oppressed for so long and now it's your turn.
Exactly.
So retribution, naked blind retribution, everything that the granola crunchers had railed against for years and years and years, they're now practicing it. You guys are the bullies, okay?
Well, and that's
you are the Dan Savages
That's what the
of homosexuality.
law does. The law empowers people.
It does. Okay, Dan Savage, for those who aren't aware, who are listening to this show, is a gay activist who is an out-and-out jerk. He is a bully. He is a miscreant. He is in process right now of a TV show deal with Disney. You may have seen this come across news feeds or what have you on Facebook or Twitter. There's a part of me that desperately wants to see Disney do this show, because I think it's going to land like a big fat egg and be horrible. Dan Savage isn't funny. He isn't particularly knowledgeable. He is an angry, self-loathing individual. Nowhere is the admonition to be comfortable in your own skin applicable than to Dan Savage. Okay? Anyone that angry, he ain't comfortable in his skin. This isn't about being oppressed. This is about the fact that he hates who he is. He hates himself as a person. But I find that a lot of these LGBT activists are in the same boat. How are you different than Fred Phelps and Westboro Baptist Church? Tell me, please. Inquiring minds want to know. How are you different than the Fred Phelps and Westboro Baptist Church loons? Here's the secret. You guys aren't.
No,
you are exactly the same.
Yep.
Knock it the hell off.
Right now, you're just the opposite side of the coin.
Yeah.
Quit being the coin.
There are gay couples out there going to churches to find a pastor to marry them. And they know full well that the pastor's going to say, no, I don't believe in it. And they're doing it just so that way they can go and sue them. It's no different than the handicapped person going around trying to find the building without.
And there is one guy I know that does that, who's got the code book with him. He brings a tape measure. He goes to these little tiny businesses. He finds crap that is not ADA compliant, and he sues them.
Right, so he can make money.
And that's what he does for a living.
Right.
It is no different.
He's not handicapped, but he'll sue because they don't have a handicapped ramp.
No, he's handicapped, but the point is that when you go out of your way, especially when you're dealing with these little people, why don't you guys go try suing Gates or somebody? Wouldn't you take all of this to somebody with deep pockets? You know why you won't? Because they've got lawyers who would cream you. And you're not looking for justice. You're looking for a quick buck and to get your name in the headlines. Knock it the hell off. There's my commentary for the day.
Yes.
I'm just disgusted with this. I was disgusted with it when Fred Phelps was doing with it, and I'm disgusted with it now with these LGBT. You're not doing your cause any good. Stop it.
You're not a hero.
Stop it.
No.
Stop it. Grow up, for God's sakes. Stop it.
Join the human race.
Nobody cares. Look, nobody cares that you're gay. Nobody cares that you're transgendered, okay? No one cares.
Well, I mean,
not that much.
It's the same thing like with Michael Sam, the NFL player, who all these people made such a big deal when the Rams kicked him out because it must be because he's gay. Not that he was a crappy football player. And everyone else is like, everyone who knows football went, probably not. Nobody here even cares that he's gay. We all just care if he performs or not. And the LGBT community just went, nope. He's gay, and that's why he's being oppressed. That's why you guys kicked him out.
Yeah, but of course, when Tim Tebow got kicked out, and when his contract wasn't renewed, that was fine.
That's because he sucked.
He's a sucky Christian. He prayed.
No, I don't know about his Christianity, but his football playing really was not that great.
I believe the exact words that the Jets used was that he was a bad practicer.
The average lifespan of any NFL player, I think, is about 3 years, right?
About that.
3 to 5.
So, I mean, come on, guys. Look, we can throw stones at each other all day long. Part of the purpose of this show today was to root out some of what I believe are some errors within the Christian church, and to highlight the fact that there are people out there in the church that are aware of them, are as disgusted by them as you are, but also don't think that they define the person. I'm a pudgy, middle-aged, graying Christian who has been called so many different names by my church and my Christian brethren. I can't even begin to count them. Now, should I have sued these people for discrimination, or just say, you know what, that's what you believe. I think I'm going to go over here and do my own thing because I think you guys are spun. Well, yeah. I picked the latter because why would I want to sue them, become this impediment, become this stumbling block, as Paul talked about, for others? All the people on the outside, on the periphery, that was not my goal. And as part of the LGBT community, it should not be your goal. Your goal is, look, we all have sexuality. Whether we wish to acknowledge it or not is beside the point. We all have sexuality. It doesn't have to define who we are. We are more than the sum total of our corporeal parts, as I said earlier. Who am I as a person? Am I a person that somebody wants to be with? Or am I this misanthrope who drives everybody away from me? You know, and then there you can see clear differences. Heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual, transgendered, gay,
pangender,
it doesn't matter.
Whatever the other 65 genders are that are out there.
Stop defining yourself by your genitalia, for the love of God.
No!
I don't know if I've beaten the subject to death or not.
I agree totally, Chase.
I think we've covered it.
You know, the simple fact is, if you're homosexual, can you go to heaven? Yeah. God doesn't care about your act. He cares about your heart and what's going on there. We are no longer under this noose and sledgehammer of the Old Testament.
Well, and he cares about them he wants them to have relationship with him.
And that's all it's about.
And the Christian community has a tendency to push them away in a way that, why? If Christians are the ones that accurately represent our Father's heart, they're going away believing that they're hated by God.
Because that's what's been conveyed to them.
Right. And so why can't we figure it out that whether it's whatever right or wrong or whatever issue it is or whatever in anybody's life, it takes relationship with God to overcome things. So even if they are wrong, but what if they're not wrong for them? What if they're dealing with stuff, DNA, genetics, things that happened? I mean, we see people born with issues, physical issues. Well, maybe they're born with gender issues. I don't know.
But even if they're not born with gender issues, let's put the gender. Let's put that part aside for a moment. What I highlighted earlier, if you are a heterosexual male or even a heterosexual female, but you're screwing like a rabbit, you have absolutely zero attachment to any one person, how the hell does that somehow make you better than...
It doesn't.
And this is what I get hot under the collar over the church about, is that they would clearly look at the homosexual as a sinner and will go to hell. But the guy screwing around with his wife, well, that's to be expected. Even the patriarchs did it, let me tell you.
Well, and
that's about it, too.
And there's forgiveness for that.
Well, yeah, that's okay.
There's forgiveness for that.
That's okay. Or if you're an unmarried male or female and you're out there nailing everyone you can 2 or 3 times a week, as many partners.
You probably don't have a whole lot of time for church, so what difference does it make?
Well,
there are people out there, and but we'll accept them in the church and not. And this, you need to kind of stop that, but that's okay.
And what this points out is, where's their heart? Where's their heart at?
And that brings us full circle around back to what Christ said in Matthew, is that for him it was a matter of the heart and not so much a matter of the action. Because the heart will essentially define the action, but if we as a church are not displaying Christ's face to these people, How else are they supposed to learn? How else are they supposed to know? How are they supposed to know what the love of Christ is?
Well, here's my point.
When you hate him.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, now I don't buy this, but let's say for the sake of argument that homosexuality, the act of homosexuality, is very important to God. Well, if we're going to go the typical Orthodox route and they become saved, God will deal with it and them in His time.
And what if it means nothing to him?
He's not going to deal with it.
Well, I mean, what if it is not
What if it's not
a
important?
deal breaker? It's kind of like, well,
Yeah.
like Christ put it on par with everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah, the homosexuals are doing that, but then so are all you guys. You're doing the exact same thing. I don't really see a differentiation.
I don't either. The people that will fight us on this, tooth and nail, will go to 1 Corinthians and read where it talks about homosexuality and sexual immorality not inheriting the kingdom of God. One, they don't know what the kingdom of God is.
And two, they don't really understand the whole situation with sexual immorality.
Right. Well, and then they just don't keep reading. Because when you go down right past it, right where we've quoted many times, Paul's saying, I can do everything. It's just some things are not beneficial.
Yeah, and I've never, let me underscore that, I've never heard that preached in a church. I've never heard a pastor say, all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. I've never heard that. And do you want to know why? Because
destroys the law.
It takes their power and flushes it down the toilet.
It's a
Because all of a sudden it
to the law.
becomes, it throws the law under the bus. But it also takes a pastor who's in control of his flock and absolutely throws him out the window.
Well, and one of the first...
Because now you're going to be a shepherd rather than the controller.
Right.
Now
But-
you're a peer other than a master.
Well, what's a pastor, a shepherd, supposed to do to the flock? He's not supposed to take them to the water and force them to drink and force them to eat.
And if you're a good pastor, you do. And the ones that won't, you throw out.
Yeah, the real shepherds are the ones that just look over the flock and keep the wolves at bay.
Yeah, well, instead of breaking the sheep's leg, they actually kill them. They kill the sheep. Anyway, if you're going to use scripture and analogies, so the thing is that God, we can have relationship with God, and that's what's important. He wants to encourage, wants us to understand who we are. He wants us to understand who He is, and as long as the law, the power, the hate, and all of that stuff is the issue, the focus is all wrong. We're not focusing on who we are, who He is, how much He loves us, and the position that we're in, being spiritual beings in this physical realm. None of that's being looked at. Instead, it's just black and white, letter of the law.
Well, yeah, and one of the things I want to highlight, too, is, again, focusing back on the four of us, with, I suppose, the possible exception of Wally, we've all more or less been shown the door by the churches that we attended.
Shown the door? I was told to leave and not come back.
So it's not as though that we haven't confronted issues with the church that haven't also faced the LGBT community. I've been told I'm a heretic. I've been told I'm going to hell. I've been told I was a danger to other people within the body.
Well, isn't that just swell?
It's important to understand that just because they're not raking me because of my sexuality, trust me, they have plenty of other things they're going to rake me for and are. The church
It's the way they are.
is juvenile in its thinking. What we're doing here at Across the Cosmos hopefully is showing you that irrespective the boorish behavior displayed by the traditional Orthodox Church, there are Christians out there who do understand the primary goal is relationship. There are homosexuals out there, lesbians, the LGBT, who are struggling with your identity. You've been told that your identity is your sexuality, and your identity is not your sexuality. Your sexuality is ancillary. Your identity is who you are in Christ. And that means being comfortable with who you are. When you start to love yourself, you're not going to be going to bakeries trying to knock out somebody you don't know. You aren't going to be raising holy hell to destroy other people who've never done a thing to you, except be who they are. As much as the Christian church needs to wake up, grow up, and understand their function, so do those standing outside of that and looking in. No one's keeping you from a relationship with Christ. You are keeping you from a relationship with Christ. This show, if nothing else, should have highlighted that clear enough to let you folks know that you want a relationship. There are roads, there are avenues, there are means upon which you can have that relationship, and it will be explained to you in a straightforward, comprehensive way where you don't have to go spewing and propagating hate. The decision is yours. The heterosexual community, especially within the church, is well aware of their sins. This isn't about continuing to beat each other up over their sins. It's about understanding where we have been, where we are now, and going forward in true love and unity. We can't do it alone. You guys are the other part of the equation. This is a racial thing. It is a sexual thing. It is a heart thing. It is a human thing. And that's how I think we need to approach it. That's how I am approaching it.
It's
if
the
you
way
can come up with a better solution, I'm all ears. info@acrossthecosmos.com. That is our website. You can write me, or email address. You can write any one of us and take us to task, ask us questions, etc. We'll listen, we'll read them on air, and we'll respond. But really, both sides need to knock off the stupid behavior. This is two kids throwing rocks at each other, trying to knock the other one out. Both people are going to get hurt. Stop it! Stop it!
Right, stop that! Silly!
it's enough.
I've got to get off of that.
It's enough.
I've got to stop it.
It's time to grow up.
Yes, and it's also time to end this episode because we have run out of time. So, for
Lou Rodgers.
Wally Rodgers.
And David Cameron.
I am Chase Rockwell saying so long until the next time you find yourself across the cosmos.
Send any questions or comments to us via email at info@acrossthecosmos.com. Also, visit us on the web at www.acrossthecosmos.com for show updates, news, and other important information. No part of this podcast may be used without the express written permission from the staff of Across the Cosmos. Across the Cosmos is a production of Omite Corporation. Copyright 2015.